A very warm welcome to everyone. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Please feel free to introduce yourselves on the chat. Tell us your names and the places you are joining us from. And I, Aishwarya from the TCI team, would like to extend a very warm welcome to all once again. And thank you for taking out the time and joining the session on a Saturday morning. Let me just quickly start by laying down some ground rules for the session. The session is being recorded, as you might have noticed already. We will be uploading the session on our YouTube channel, so you can go back to it later on if you want to rewatch it. I will share the link of the YouTube channel in the chat very shortly. The session will be conducted in English. Please stay on mute throughout the session. We will have a dedicated segment for audience interaction towards the end. And you can keep your videos on if possible. And if you have any comments, any suggestions, any advice, um, please do consider giving your valuable feedback to us during the session or at the end of it. You can write it to us to our email ID, which I will also put in the chat. Um, I will very quickly introduce our organizations to anyone who is joining our session for the first time. The Climate Initiative is a non-governmental organization that has been working in the climate education sector for more than 2 years now. The goal of TCI is to make climate education intersectional, holistic, accessible, and actionable for all. And we primarily target children who go to school, colleges, and young professionals, youth primarily, but also the larger citizens. And we do this by providing education that caters to locally relevant contexts, by providing guidance and mentorship to undertake effective environmental action, and also by broadening perspectives on pertinent social and environmental issues. We have an array of programs that are running under the organization, which go under the verticals of Green Warriors, which cater to young children who go to schools and colleges, and another vertical called Mind the Gap, which is more catering to a young, to general audience as well as to organizations. Um, Right now, we have a new program that is the Climate Leadership Program that has been ongoing since August, which is a 6-month training program which provides comprehensive and cross-disciplinary training to young people across India. A lot of our participants present today are from our cohort. Um, and the program aims to empower, guide, equip these young climate leaders with the knowledge, skills, and mindset on core climate change themes, and also give them the platform to undertake.
Why are you muted?
Yeah, okay. Um, so that's a little bit about the climate leadership program. You can always refer to our Instagram and LinkedIn pages to know more about what our cohort is on to. Um, a little bit about the Earth Talks, which is this particular session. The Earth Talks is a community building space where we meet almost every month to discuss some aspect related to climate change and larger socio-environmental issues. The idea is to get experts and to get an audience who wants to understand about that topic and to have a very simple um, like a coffee table conversation and to basically demystify these big jargonistic climate change terms that we are thrown with in the newspaper and everywhere else. That's a little bit about the programs that we have ongoing at the moment. Um, I will quickly introduce the topic of the session, but before I get into the topic, there is an activity that we have planned. Um, I request Viveka to share the link of this activity. It will take you to a website called menti.com. Please use that link, go on to the website. You will see a question pop in front of you. the question is, what comes to your mind when you hear the word artificial intelligence? And just put response of one or at the max two-worded response. And while you do that, I will introduce you with the topic. And then maybe in a minute or so, we can have the results on the screen as well. Okay, so while you all do that, let me quickly also introduce the topic. So I believe you all have an idea that today's session is going to be about artificial intelligence, but the it is basically part two of this two-part series on climate solutions that we've been having since last week. Um, those of you who had joined us last week know that we had a conversation on governance related mechanisms as solutions to climate change last week. And that gave like a very perfect segue to transition into discussing technology because governance and technology really need each other if we want to bring in effective climate solution. This particular session will focus on climate technologies, but specifically on the use of artificial intelligence in climate technologies, which is rampantly increasing. The reason why we decided to pick artificial intelligence as the sole theme of this discussion was because of its sheer relevance and importance today, and also because there is a lot that we think we know about it, but and we have a lot of misconceptions, a lot of conceptions that may not give us the entire picture. And we have three great speakers who are experts in artificial intelligence, um, using it in their own work, and we will be hearing about it from them. So, okay, we have a lot of results. Um, let us just go through these results. It's okay, unnecessary. This is also like for the speakers to take a look at sort of opinions coming from the audience. It's a double-edged sword. It is the future. Someone has written excitement. Someone has written ethical concerns. Um, no human touch. Chat GPT. That is also, I think, what I and most of us relate artificial intelligence largely with. Okay, great. This looks good. Maybe Tulika, who will be moderating the session, can pick cues from this. We can have this probably on the screen for another minute if we have more responses coming. But I will very quickly hand over to Tulika to tell us a little bit about the speakers. Tulika, over to you.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Hello, I'm Tulika, and I work with TCI on Earth Talks with Aishwarya. Let me introduce you to all the guest speakers for today's session. It's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Maya, who is an accomplished AI researcher, lecturer, and ethicist who brings a wealth of expertise in AI and its ethical implications. She's a recognized AI expert with GPAI, OECD, and co-leads the India Project for the Future of Work Council, while also curating AI literacy programs for the informal sector. Her leadership extends globally as an MTE climate ambassador for the World Bank's Youth Group. She also mentors tech practitioners on climate AI across South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. As the co-founder of Elephant, an open source climate platform supported by FAO, and Salesforce, Maya works at the intersection of AI and sustainability with With an MSc from Oxford Internet Institute, her research on AI ethics and intersectionality has been published in esteemed journals. Thank you so much, Maya, for taking out time and joining us. On to our next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Thwanil Nath Kharika, a group manager at Esri India with expertise in data science, business analytics, remote sensing, and geo AI. With nearly a decade of experience in research, solution development, and teaching, just a sec. Yeah. In teaching, Dr. Dhwanilnath has worked extensively at the intersection of technology and climate science. A PhD holder in applied geomatics from Nirma University, he has collaborated with the Space Application Center, ISRO, to build and train geospatial forecasting models. His specialization in remote sensing, meteorology, and machine learning has led to the development of several geo AI based models addressing climate and meteorological challenges. Dr. Dhwanil Nath has over 27 research publications to his credit and has been honored with numerous national and international awards for his contributions. Thank you so much, Dr. Dhwanil Nath, for joining us here. And finally, on to our final guest for today, meet Dhruva Agarwal. He is the program lead at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, CEW. With nearly 8 years of experience in public policy, he has worked on energy efficiency, clean energy integration, and digitizing power infrastructure. His contributions span state-level research in India and international collaborations with the USA and Indonesia. A co-author of the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Report and a Next Generation India Fellow for Clean Energy, Dhruvak is shaping the future of energy policy. He holds a Master of Philosophy from Cambridge and a Bachelor of Technology from Manipal University, Jaipur. We're truly lucky to have such a diverse and a knowledgeable panel with us. And I'm so excited to have a good conversation with all of you on how we can use AI in the climate space and what's the future of AI. Okay. Yeah. So before I ask my first question, I want to mention it to my guest speakers that many in the audience are coming from a diverse background, and many of us might not be familiar with the technical details. So I would request if you could explain your response in a way that's easy to understand for all age groups, right? Uh, Now I'll jump on to my first question and won't take much time, which is a very general one. We've seen what people think about AI, that many of them are not happy with it. They're saying it's a threat, it's a double-edged sword, that it has no human touch. So to Dhwanil, I want to ask you very briefly, can you tell us the use of AI and how it has, evolved, especially when you're using it to address the climate crisis, which is a huge crisis. And specifically, can you tell us how are you incorporating AI within your work in geospatial modeling?
Thanks, Kalika. So there were certain very interesting opinions which people share. I think AI has started off as an idea when ChatGPT became very famous, and most of us associate information when it comes to that. But this field is more than 60 years old, which in the early 1960s is when the first idea of AI or the background algorithm came into existence. ChatGPT itself is at least 21 years old, where the third model is what we call ChatGPT. But when it comes to this evolution, it is primarily because everything has become digitized. When you're dealing with a lot of hand to hand work, it's not really easy for us to work with it. But with the amount of data that we are generating on a daily basis, and I'm not simply saying all the communications or social media output, but when you're talking about studies, when you're talking about research, when you're talking about information that can be relevant to use, where to predict answers, to generate resolutions, developing algorithms, it has developed to a point that these AI models have come into picture. They're not complicated. It's the issue when it comes to with AI models is that everybody treats them like a black box. They are not very complicated. They're not very hard. The truth is that they are just mathematics running in the background, and we are trying to figure out solutions from it. And they have developed primarily because the number of data points that we have started generating. So when it comes to AI models in the domain that I have specialized in, if you have satellite data or if you have weather data coming on our even on our phones every 10 minutes, we consistently check, especially for people who are in Noida or Delhi or in the northern belt where you have a lot of smoke. So that AQI component as well. There we constantly check on it at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, looking at that, is it okay for us to step out? There is where the data and the models come into picture. In fact, the AQI parameter that we see right now comes out of a few weather stations that are placed across the state or the country, and they are just aggregated or scaled up so that we can see the value anywhere we are. So right now, if I am sitting in Noida, it's 412. I know the closest weather station to me is at least 12 kilometers away. So this is where AI models are being used. One of the easiest ways that you can connect different components, you can connect different parameters or factors which will influence it. So for fog, you need where the forest fires are coming from, where you have these sensors developed, what is the weather, what is the temperature, humidity, cover, visibility, everything collectively is what gives us UI. So these parameters, these components, all of these AI models eventually are right now being used to give us solutions at the tip of our fingers. So from my phone itself, I'm just looking at checking what the AQI model is, and one of the ways it is. It's the same with temperature or any other component that we want to work on.
Yeah, right. I mean, AQI and the weather is the hot topic right now, which is something every person living in Delhi NCR is talking about. I'll get back to you on that and how you use it further. I'll move on to Dhruva and ask you, given your work in the renewable and clean energy sector, which is a booming sector within the climate space, what role is AI playing in your work?
Yeah, thanks, Tulika, and thanks TCI for having me. Super excited to be on the panel and talk to everyone. So yeah, I mean the energy transition. I mean I'm probably just to give a little bit of context, right? So from a system that used to be very linear, very predictable patterns of how people consume electricity and when they consume it, and very predictable ways of generating electricity. You tell a thermal power plant that this is how much energy I require, and you put in that much fuel, and it will give you that power regardless of what the weather conditions are. From this sort of system, we're heading into a lot more weather dependency and a lot more variability, right? In fact, both domains. So as your supply also becomes more solar and wind dependent, it's affected by weather patterns in the short term and in the long term. And similar shift is also happening on the demand side of things. Increasingly consumers are not just consumers, they're also producing their own energy. We've got solar rooftop panels on our rooftop. In the coming years, we might have electrical vehicles that that's a back some of our loads within the household as well. So there's a lot of variability that's coming within the energy system. From a very linear way of working is becoming a very variable way of working. And that's essentially where there's a lot of room for something like AI to detect what patterns there are in both the demand and the supply side of things to help manage the system a little bit better. So in the last few years, just from a physical system, we are also becoming a cyber physical system, right? It's usually in the past we used to have like electromechanical meters that used to have a rotating disk in our electricity meters to measure our consumption. Now from there we have digital meters, and increasingly we also have smart meters. So these meters are capable of recording energy consumption in each 15-minute time block, and perhaps more than that. So the amount of data that's getting generated on demand and on electricity demand and on patterns, and on the supply side of things is massive. So, there's really no way for us to humanly use all of that information to manage the system in real time. And that's a very key aspect of electricity, that at every given point in time, there has to be the same amount of energy in the system as is demanded. There is very little room for storage at this point. So, yeah, so that's essentially the role that AI is playing, right? Helping us predict and forecast demand a lot better, which kind of consumer is going to consume how much electricity at what point in time, and also how much electricity is going to be available at that point in time. How much solar do we have, how much wind do we have, and giving that level of intelligence to the operators of the power system to be able to manage electricity sort of in real time. And the other thing is also, again, relating it to what Dhanil also said, is that increasingly our historical weather patterns are also not reflective of the future, right? I mean, we've got rain patterns that are becoming more erratic rather than more regular. We've got summers that are hotter. We've got sandstorms. We've got winters which are more smoky. So your solar output is affected by that. So I mean, using earlier techniques and regular mathematical techniques, we might be able to pick up historical data of the last 20 years, and to a large level of accuracy, still be able to predict, what the next season is going to look like. But increasingly, that's not the case because of climate change. There's all of, the weather patterns are also shifting. So that's also where we need to start collecting a lot more granular information about how these geospatial variables are impacting sort of weather patterns on a more localized level, and produce this intelligence on availability of energy and demand of energy, again, at a more localized level. And that's the direction we are headed in. And there's a lot of work that's going on across all these levels, just having better weather intelligence to be able to predict supply and demand, to be able to have better demand intelligence, to be able to, schedule your power supply in a more reliable manner. And then also real-time management of the physical system that's there, giving generators and consumers of electricity signals in real time on how much they can consume and how much they should be consuming. So yeah, it's there's a whole army of startups now, which is looking at the energy space as a new revenue opportunity. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that looks very interesting, because from what it seems, it has made AI, as you're saying, it has made taking information more efficient, time saving, and helping us to make informed advancements. And if you want to make it in a very localized manner, you need more data. And on to Maya, I would like to ask you the same question. You've worked in a very diverse area and you've incorporated AI there. What are your thoughts on this role and in addressing climate crisis, and how do you specifically use AI in your work?
Thank you so much for the question. And again, huge thanks for Climate Act Initiative, and again for the panelists. I think it's a timely topic, and there are so different perspectives to it. And I think that the special part is, of course, the cross-cultural understanding of how we can actually deliver AI across solutions, across sectors. As in many things connected to the implementation of AI, I would say that the role is a bit ambiguous. And I think that especially for ethicists, we tend to highlight the complexity behind. But I would say that the recent years, and especially Gen AI, has also showed us the opportunity behind. And I mean, I think just from listening to the other co-panelists, and I think it's important to say this, but we can see also the very tremendous opportunity that Gen AI bring to our life. And when we're thinking on it, I mean, it's an extension to what humans do. So when we're thinking on what AI is and what's the role of it in climate, we can treat AI as the third arm that we don't have, especially when we're trying to treat such a wicked problem and when we're trying to understand the complexities of climate. And when we're thinking more specifically, so I think that especially as you saw in the answer that you gave on what AI is and what its role, so many said that it's artificial. And I think that especially when you're listening probably to us and other scholars around this discipline, I would say that AI is pretty human. And I think that's perhaps some of the problems that we're encountering. So when we're thinking on the role of AI, we need to understand that there is still a very strong human element and nature in everything connected to the way that AI is solving climate, which is, I think, a paradoxical statement alone. but it also shows a bit of the complexity that we are facing when we're speaking about AI. Because in the end, it's a machine, but it's a machine that mimics human behavior. And when we're putting it in climate solutions, trying to solve some of the biggest climate threats, we need to understand that a lot of the human fallacies that AI is mimicking, as well as some of the good things that actually are there, might be replicated. So I'm bringing a bit the ethical aspect here. Of course, I guess we'll delve into this a bit afterwards. But the role of AI in climate change is paradoxical, first of all, because it mimics us. But in many ways, we're also seeing a lot of opportunities when it comes to, again, to increase data analytics, the ability to monitor in real time natural hazards, the ability generally to have better decision making. And I think that's probably one of the biggest assets that AI is bringing to the table, the ability to have more informed decisions and calculate the steps. So specifically in my capacity, I'm co-leading the India project on AI literacy for farmers. And the point was to see how we can empower the informal sector. And the role that AI is playing here is tremendous. It can bring some harm because AI can also replace certain professions when we're thinking on it. And you also mentioned in the Mentimeter, there are ethical concerns. The future of it can replace certain professions from existing because it automates some of the things that today are kind of prevalent. But one of the things that we are trying to do with AI is also to show how it can be used to empower people, how it can be used to empower communities. And I would say specifically in India, you will see a lot of different initiatives and schemes that actually use the power of AI to help farmers to take much more informed decisions, understand how to better grow their crops, how to be better prepared against different natural hazards and any climate threats. So this is, again, an additional educational component that AI is brought into the table that can help different marginalized communities or generally professions that might be under the threat of being replaced by AI. So if there is something that I'll be glad for you to take out of the talks here generally, I guess, at least from my perspective, is understanding that there is a very strong balance when we're speaking about the role of AI. We are seeing the opportunities. There are so many things that we can do in the climate space. We can be much more prepared for, again, energy, smart capacity. We can be better prepared for natural hazards. The problem is the implementation in cases and the fact that AI replicates some of the problems that we have as humans when we're speaking about biases, when we're speaking about the lack of transparency. A lot of the things that actually shape how AI is being delivered. So there is a lot of, I would say there is a very big gap between what AI can potentially do. And you will hear a lot of possibilities when people are describing it in the climate space. But it's also important to understand that there are also a lot of implications because AI is not autonomous and AI is dependent on us. And in the end, we're not implementing AI in a bubble. We're implementing AI in a contextual scenario of a climate threat in this case. And there we need to also consider the other sociocultural factors. So this was, again, a bit of a glimpse to what I believe is the role of AI in climate change, which I think is promising, but yet, as in many other things in life, it also has some repercussions if we don't understand exactly the more, I would say, the multifaceted role of technology in human society.
Great. I think what you just said, it clears, like, it brings a new insight. Because I remember Aishwarya also mentioning before, and someone in the Mentimeter had mentioned that it has no human touch, that our understanding of AI is limited to just, chat GPTs. So you saying that, it has a human element, it's also a very new fact for me. And that gives a good segue to the next question I have for the audience. I want to ask everyone who's here, what do you think are the pros and cons of AI? So, yeah, there's a Mentimeter that will be shared with you. I want everyone to answer after listening to the insights that was shared by our panelists. What are the opinions? Viveka, can you share the screen?
Think there's some issue with Mentimeter right now. We can just have people share their responses on the chat here. It's the same Mentimeter, so you have to move ahead. If you kind of click on the next one, you might be able to see the next question. Just try, otherwise you can share your answers in
It took
chat.
some time to update. I refreshed the page and it's updated now with the latest
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, someone says initial job losses, growing energy and water consumption. Techno-social inequality, much powerful than the wealth inequality. Interesting. It makes it easy to work. It sure does. I've been using it on my work every day. Okay, I think, yeah. It take over our lives as we see it today. Can equipped with managing huge data. Interesting. Well, it's quite interesting. Using a lot of energy and water to produce answers leading to water energy. Wow, that's funny also. So yeah, that brings me to my question to Dhruvak. Dhruvak, as you see, people do know that using AI itself is consuming a lot of carbon, energy itself in producing renewable energy. I have a fact here. It says a figure here says training GPT-3, which was the precursor AI system to the current ChatGPT, generated 502 metric tons of carbon, which is equivalent to driving 112 petrol-fueled cars for a year. So I understand that AI has immense potential. It makes our lives efficient and easier, and what we are headed to is much greater. But these are also highlighting how carbon intensive this sector is. How do we address this paradox while using AI for climate solutions?
Yeah, I think the answer is in two parts. I think the first part is just prioritizing that what are the end uses of AI that are really useful and that should actually be implemented and sort of taken to a larger scale. Like Maya was saying, like not everything is probably, you can use AI for a whole bunch of applications, but again, it's really should be human centered, and we should be looking at it from that point of view, like what are the problems that people are facing that AI can help solve. Is it just about improving the delivery of food? Is it just reducing the time from 10 minutes to 2 minutes? Is that the only application that we require AI for? Or some of the end users, there might be in agriculture, geospatial analytics, just managing the energy system a little bit better. So I think the jury is still out on what are the best uses and how should we prioritize AI, given that at this point it's so dominated by big tech. That might not necessarily be sort of the end users that do get prioritized, and that's why there's a lot of cooperation, there's a lot of thinking at a society level that needs to happen to figure out what those end users. As in anything else, right? Everything starts with, even when you're talking about cleaning the energy system, you start with energy efficiency first, and then you think about renewable energy. So I think having those list of those end user applications in place is one part of it, so that we're not using AI for anything and everything. And then the second part of it is that I think it's pretty clear by now that AI does have the potential to help us make informed decisions, increase productivity, sort of open up new industries entirely. So I think that there is a lot of skepticism about how much AI we require at this point. It's just that, I mean, we do need it. Uh, how much might be a question, but we do need it. So once we do prioritize some applications, it's then about you know producing more clean energy to supply it. And you know in the last couple of years, Amazon and Google and Facebook, so they've rolled back on their carbon mitigation targets because of how much energy and investment they're putting into sort of AI. It's becoming sort of an arms race. But they're at the same time they're also setting up their own nuclear power plants, right? Like if you look it up, so Microsoft is now looking to set up its entire fleet of nuclear power plants just to power its own data centers, where it's using these massive graphical processing units, GPUs, as they're called, to train their engines. So I think that's the other big problem that we would need to solve. We're definitely going to be using a lot more AI. But then how do we also supply the electricity that it requires in a cleaner manner? And the water part of it is also something of a blind spot, I think, at this point, because the amount of heat that these data centers generate, all of the water that's required, I mean, it requires massive amounts of water for cooling. So that's the other big part, right? Are there alternative solutions that are out there that we can use for cooling? Can we make the sort of the data center process itself a little bit more efficient so that it's not giving out that much heat? But then also, how do we use the water more efficiently? How do we recycle it? How do we make it sort of a net zero discharge situation at the data center level as well? Yeah, so I think figuring out where do we actually want to use AI? What are the most important human-centered applications we want to use it for? And then once we have that narrowed down, parallelly also figuring out like how do we use AI in a low carbon manner. I think the solutions are there. It's just that we need to think a little bit harder about prioritizing them, and also giving access to everyone.
Right. It's just about, streamlining our process because we're still in the process of exploring more. Right. Okay. Moving on to Dhwanil, as you had mentioned initially, AI is extensively used in climate modeling for projections and even predicting extreme weather cases, as Dhruva had also mentioned, like cyclones and floods. What are the challenges in using AI for climate modeling? And how does one ensure that the output generated from these models is actually reliable and unbiased?
Okay, so let's take one question at a time. When you're talking about challenges, one of the biggest concerns is the data itself. How reliable it is? Can we trust it? Can we work with it? So this question was actually posed back in 2024 when India's space research program, so ISRO, was trying to tie up with CNES, which is in France, for a new temperature profile that they wanted to release. So during that panel discussion, this was one of the biggest concerns, that if the target is to talk about the temperature, because that is a very key component that we are looking at, how do we ensure that it is, one, sustainable, because it will take at least 3-4 years to launch? And I was part of that workshop 3 days ago, where the tentative deadline for launching it is 2026. Now, if you're looking at it in a large scale, then the question comes that how do you sustain it in a larger front? Secondly, you're looking at data which is being generated on a smaller scale so that it is more feasible, more centric to humans, or even looking at the higher resolution so that you can make better predictions. So there, what people are doing is, one, they are looking at how to simulate synthetic data, because it's not possible to get data which is available everywhere. But what if you can simulate it? What if you can just see what if scenarios being generated and then try to cater it with all the possibilities? So as Dhruva was already mentioning that now the climate is changing because of global warming and everything associated with. Older models don't work, which means that something new has to be taken up. How do we see that gap, that difference between the old components and the new ones right now? So in order to maintain that, in order to assure that whatever predictions that we are working on, whatever models that we are working on are usable, are feasible, and are part of the solution. So there's a particular study that I've been associated with, again, for this temperature profile back in 2026, which is due for publication in a few weeks. There, that is the exact problem that we're looking at. So currently the temperature profile, if you're exploring even on your phones, it's not visible when you have fog, it's not visible when you have monsoon, clouds, or any type of environmental disruption where it's not possible for the satellite to check. So there we are looking at small scale AI models. Now, small scale as in something which can also work on an i5 system. But you don't have to go big, but you can actually go smaller, catering to specific challenges, and then ensuring that these solutions are working. So there, if you know, if you're compiling it, if you're working with it, it is very much possible to actually scale it down where they are more eco-friendly, more sustainable, and you don't need a large warehouse to work with it. In fact, there is an entire subsection of these chatbot approaches, which the conceptual term is large language models. There is a counter system which is being developed since the last 3.5 years, which is called SLM, small language models. Now, these small language models are trainable, developable in i7 systems or a MacBook A2 or A1 chip. So instead of using 1,000 processors, which ChatGPT 3, GPT 3.1 required, and a massive amount of reservoir of energy to actually cool the system down, there now you're only working on specific situations as, let's say, the 10th grade workbooks or all the material. You can just train it on your laptops and then just work with it to provide simple solutions. So this is how one way we are also going sustainable. And when it comes to the data itself, when you have this synthetic approach, and the second approach, what people call is the ensemble approach, which is extensively picking up in entire environmental space and climate space, where you're not just looking at the data, let's say coming from towers or let's say coming from satellite, it is also coming from crowd opinions, where people are just tagging, okay, the temperature is too high here. If you have any sensors, it is also looking at the sensors which are inside the car. It is also looking at people just walking and picking it up. It is also inclusive, sorry, it is also inclusive of small observations which people make. Okay, oh, it is foggy here. So this ensemble approach actually takes everybody's opinion and collectively develops solutions, because a person on the ground will have a better understanding of their surroundings than someone sitting, let's say, 1,000 miles away. So this is how the ensemble approach is also being used to, one, build these models, second, avoid these biases and errors that are coming, and third, it also makes it sustainable because you have different sources coming in. So the large satellite data actually comes less, and you have these smaller observations combining to provide a better solution.
That is pretty interesting to know, how, something can be as big as AI, which uses a lot of big data. It can be scaled down, and you also touched upon the sustainable aspect of it. I will be getting back to you on that part again. Onto Maya, when it comes to using AI for climate solutions, and we've also seen from people's responses, and this has been constant throughout this session, that it uses a lot of data. It's massive. There are concerns about privacy, regulations, and its transparency also, which is a huge concern. And when we're dealing with something as sensitive as climate, when we're using it on, as you work with the farmers, when you're using their data, many regulations work around that. How do we ensure that the data we collect through AI, it remains secure and there's transparency when making AI-driven decisions?
So that's probably one one of the biggest loopholes of what we see today when it comes to AI. But I think that it's mainly relevant because in the end we do want to make the user safe. One of the biggest problems I feel that users are just not aware of what's happening with their data. So a lot of the user safety discussions around AI started after some affairs showed that actually the data can be used afterwards by third parties. So your question, which is again is a crucial one, will have different answers according to to the link connected in the value chain. And I'm saying this because there is a role for the regulator, there is a role for the developer, there is a role for the user, and there is a role for academia in a way. And we need to understand this, because I feel that this question just shows that it's not only one actor who can say, this is how we're going to make AI more transparent and more ethical and responsible to be used in the informal sector. There is a role that we have, I guess, as educators and program creators, as we are trying to do in the project with the OECD. So the OECD here does not play the role of the regulator. It's more of a power multiplier, another educating force that can help educate users on how AI can be used. In our case specifically, when we're designing the literacy programs in the informal sector and targeting, of course, the farmers, we are trying to teach them how AI can be used better and more responsibly. Now, who are the ones who can actually help us make this more transparent? Is, first of all, the users who will be able to understand what AI is. So big component of the answer will be literacy and fluency. The way to make AI more visible, to make users understand what is actually the data they're giving, will also require us to teach users what AI is all about. So this is one. The other component, of course, is everything connected to, I would say, ethics by design. And it's a bit more on how we're actually working with developers and guiding them. So we'll be able to create platforms that use AI, but in a way that is still transparent and accountable in a way. Now, these two are actually quite problematic when we're speaking about AI, and I'll just say briefly that one of the biggest problems of AI is the fact that its technical structure, we call it black box model, but the technical structure is not always fully understood. And I'm saying it quite simplistically, of course. There is more to it, but this is probably the biggest issue, is that the users and sometimes many of the developers, we are unable to understand some of the errors and biases in the algorithm because of the structure. So there is a lot of work for us to do with the developers also, and the ones who are actually creating the technology and platform. We need them also to know how we're able to work on some of these issues, how we're more aware to the biases and errors, and more than anything, how we're creating the biasing tools, shifting the right statistics in a way. And I'm saying, again, it's quite simplistic, but I'm trying to put all in a way that can make sense along the other stakeholders. So there is a lot of work that we need to do with the ones who are actually creating technology, so that it will be more transparent on the technological side. And then there is, I would say, a very, very big role to the regulators and policymakers, which is, again, a different stakeholder. It's more about, again, the government work. And here we have the role of the existing AI regulations, the guidelines that we've seen about the ethical and responsible use. We saw this, I would say, I think a very good example was actually during COVID-19, when we had to see a lot of emergency regulations on how we're using the data in a way that will not harm the users. It's also very true, I would say, for climate space and generally for any AI usage. So the regulators and the policymakers will be the ones guiding the entire community on what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to using AI, because it looks very promising, but there are a lot of harms if it's not used properly. If the data afterwards will be used by third parties or advertising agencies to be able to promote the user better, if afterwards it will be easier for hackers and other malign actors to use the data for nefarious purposes. So the regulators and policymakers help us shape more the discipline by telling us what's right and wrong. So these are three different stakeholders that all have a very crucial role in how to make AI more transparent and accountable. Does it happen seamlessly? The answer is no. And it's every stakeholder has a different reason why it's not working properly. But I will say on a positive note, though, that there are a lot of efforts, first of all, to create more contextual AI regulation, understanding a bit more how it's working in climate. We are seeing much more multi-stakeholder initiatives addressing these loopholes. because this question, which is, again, very crucial, needs the answers of so many different actors who will tell you, how do we design better the technology so it will be more transparent? How the users will be more aware of what is actually the technology? But then, interestingly, how the regulators are actually shaping the rules so it will be agile enough, contextual, diverse, but still, of course, lawful and does not violate any existing guidelines or, again, international laws or legislation that we're already having. So I think we're advancing, but the answer will always be how each of these actors actually address this phenomenon, and hopefully together understanding how we're able to create better transparency mechanisms of the technology.
Right. From what it seems, it's a long process. We have too many actors addressing, like every actor also takes time. And I think so far we have demystified many things that about AI. We have debunked many myths that we all had, our audience also had. And on to my final question, which is to all of you. It is, what do you think, what is AI bringing to India? What value addition is it bringing to India in the space for climate solutions? Is there anything unique that is India doing in this space, or maybe not? And how is it developing its AI arsenal? How far we've reached? So, Maya, if you can begin with that.
Sure. I think that, I mean, honestly speaking, I think India is one of the most active actors when it comes to climate AI and generally AI today. And I mean, I worked in the Middle East, Europe, US, but what India is bringing, I would say, is probably much more nuanced solutions based on some challenges that many countries do not have. The linguistic need, I mean, not every country, I mean, we're speaking here about, again, 22 official languages, 900 non-official ones. The need in India to create solutions that cater for so many populations, this is something that currently countries are trying to deal with, because this diversity, the understanding that AI should be responsible and across different actors, across regions and in different climate threats, this is something pioneering that I would say is currently definitely paving the way for other actors to understand how AI is being designed and developed. Also, I would say the positioning of India following the presidency of G20, which again managed to combine the global north and global south, bringing Africa into the discussions, understanding how we're creating digital public infrastructure. These are all things that India, I would say, is currently leading, that definitely are an important part of how AI is being perceived today, and especially, I would say, the collective role that it has. Specifically, I would say also for my organization, so the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, established by the OECD, has been chaired by India this year. The fact that we have an India-based project, that we had the support of the Ministry of Electronics. We had, again, different summits, very productive projects of the different committees, specifically I'm in the future of work. And I think that all of this, leading initiatives by the Indian government, trying to show how we can use AI across cultures, using the knowledge that India has based on some of the challenges that the country has to go through when it comes to creating technology that is diverse enough. I would say it's something that is paving the way for other countries in the moment. Clearly, still, there are a lot of things to come. I would mention briefly, I don't know if you're aware, but the Ministry of Education just announced on 3 centers of excellency that will have the intersection of AI and additional disciplines, which is, I would say, completely pioneering. 3 institutes received the mandate. They each received a very big, I would say, financial support from the ministry to launch additional educational and, again, startup initiatives. There is an Center of Excellency of AI in Smart Cities. There is one on AI in health. There is one on AI in agriculture. And they're all situated in different places in India, based, of course, on the institute that received the mandate. But this is just one example to show you the special role that India is taking. You will see other AI initiatives around the world. You will hear a lot about the safety institutes in the UK, the regulation in Europe, which are important. There is, of course, a lot of innovation happening in other places. But I think, from my perspective, and I'm saying it as the non-Indian who has the very, I would say, the privilege to live in the country, India is able to show the intersection of AI with other disciplines in a way that I think other countries just don't do that. It's connected, of course, with some of the challenges here, but I think also to the fact that there is a very big understanding here that AI is not an autonomous phenomenon, meaning it's part of society. So different than other tech deterministic perceptions that AI will change everything and singularity is coming. In India, this human-centric understanding of innovation, I think, is bringing so many opportunities to other countries to learn, to collaborate, either through G20, GPI, and so many other things that are currently going in the country. There are actually some discussions on some safety institutes that will be in India. Again, some things might take time, but definitely exciting times, I feel, for AI globally, and I think especially with some of the very pioneering initiatives that we're currently seeing in India. So definitely more to come, I feel, from India and generally from the countries in the region.
Right, Maya, that's super. Like knowing about what we're doing from a very global perspective. I want to ask the same question to you, Dhruvak, as well, and to Dwanil also. Dhruvak, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, I think especially sort of in the climate space, India's seen as any problem that you can think of in any country, India has a little bit of that going on, right? And that gives the potential for us to think of solutions for the world. Anything that's developed in India potentially has the capability to be used someplace else as well. We've got coastal areas, we've got deserts, we've got mountains, we've got plateaus, all sorts of things. So I think in that sense, India is sort of really the melting pot of a lot of innovation, like Maya was saying. So I think we do have real potential there. And again, going from in the what India sort of India's unique value addition is also sort of population level access to a lot of these technologies. So sort of thinking from creating identity for 1.2 billion people through Aadhaar, then creating a digital public infrastructure for digital payments. I think last year is when the government of India also put out a paper on the India AI stack. So also building public infrastructure that helps everyone who can have access to that DPI to be able to work on AI. I think that's the kind of thinking that sort of India brings. And I think there's real value in it because when you decentralize innovation in that way, it also opens up that many opportunities. It's very easy for technology to entrench inequalities that are there already to sort of solidify them even further. Because if I have access to a tech, it's easier for me to benefit from it rather than someone who does not have currently access to that tech, right? So I think opening up access to this very new tech, given also a historical sort of strength in software, I think that's something that India brings. The second part of it is also at a global level. When you are talking about setting up regulations, again, AI is part of this global trend where problems are instantly global, right? It's not just localized to a particular person or a particular geography. You think about pandemics affects everyone. You think about climate change affects everyone. You're thinking about AI gets developed in one part of the world, gets deployed in another part of the world almost instantly. So I think keeping this in mind, the UN in September, as part of the Pact for the Future, there was a annex to that, which was the Global Digital Compact. And within that, all of the countries within the UN committed to setting up an international scientific panel on AI, which was to gather evidence on, what are the high priority opportunities, what are the risks, So while there needs to be a lot of contextualized development, there also needs to be a global cooperation and global understanding about how we are deploying it, what are the use cases that we are prioritizing, and what can be the risks when you're developing this in such a global manner. So I think that's also where India will have a large role to play as such a big market for for AI. I mean, we've got whatever 1.8 billion people. So it's probably going to be where a lot of this new innovation and tech sort of gets deployed. So India will sort of play a very critical role there. But what I do hope is that there's also a lot of risk that comes to India when you think about AI, because our traditional sort of strength in software has also been on application software. So there's also a risk that the initial job losses affect a lot of the people who are employed in the software industry. We have about 5 million, 5.5 million people who are employed in the software industry. It might affect those people sort of negatively. So I do hope that through all of this, through a larger voice in how the global ecosystem around AI governance and development sort of pans out, India has a better voice there. But I also hope that India is able to come up with sort of the larger, more fundamental innovations around AI, rather than just looking at the applications. And that's also where India will sort of try to get the competitive advantage over a lot of the other countries, because I don't think that's something that we can afford to overlook. We do need to take some global leadership in the development and the deployment also. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for innovation. There's a lot of human resource that we can put behind it. There's a lot of investment we can put behind it, but there's also a risk that we have to be mindful of.
Absolutely. It being a new field, there will be a lot of risk associated with it. And I think one of them most critical is the job losses that you mentioned. On to Dhwanil, what are your thoughts?
So when it comes to global modeling, when it comes to global predictions, when it comes to AI, India has a two synergy approach. One, it is consistently contributing for large scale applications where climate modeling itself, combined with AI, is providing a very beautiful solution. Just last week, I believe it was last Friday, IBM and NASA released something called a co-pilot or a Earth Chat GPT. Now, because they have a lot of data available outside, it's very difficult for people to actually do research if you don't know where to find that data. So it was officially released last week, and India did have some support in doing that. If you look at it on a larger scale, IBM Research, based out of Zurich, released a climate model which is free for all to use. So you can just download the data which has already extensively pre-trained on AI systems. So all you have to do is just add your work and it can work with it. Again, contributions have come from us. Or if you look at Destined for Earth, now this is coming out of Europe, where they are creating a 3D Earth so that they can simulate weather predictions, they can see what is coming out, they can understand how the solutions will be prepared, what extreme events will come, let's say 5 years down the line, and how do we prepare for it. So there are smaller aspects in which India has been consistently contributing on a global level, which people are gradually starting to understand. When it comes, but if you look at the second aspect of it, it is the uniqueness that we bring in. Now, one of the ways that in the space aspect of the space domain that India has marked its niche is the small satellite launch approach, where everybody is trying to make them larger and bigger and stronger. India has become a space where you have smaller satellites, which are less than this size old, or this size big, or this size heavy, whatever you want to call it. And what they are doing is that now in the new launches, which are coming from 25 and 26, they're putting small AI integrations into it, which are doing the basic correction before the data is available to all of us. So instead of having a large reservoir of data correction systems or data environments, it is actually implementing on the space itself. So if you're doing that, it also becomes sustainable. It also becomes effective, cost effective, because you have the chips and everything that you need with it is smaller, easier, and faster. So collectively, it is also sustainable. Now, that is a very new idea that has been discussed in forums. And India is, I think, one of the leaders when it comes to these type of solutions. In fact, not only this, if you look at COVID-19, which Maya was also saying, it is a big concern there. India itself has a reviewed solution when it comes to that. How do you create the micro containment zones and how do you have essential services traveling about? So that entire routing problem, that entire network, if you have somebody going or traveling to remote locations or traveling across the country for essential services, how do you ensure that one, the climate is feasible for you so that you are not affected by COVID-19? Second, how do you avoid these micro containment zones? In fact, that is a model which came out of IIT Gandhinagar, which was directly communicated to the central PMO, which is one of the few approaches in climate solutions and environmental impact which are respected pan globally. And lastly, there is a very new innovation which is being discussed. This news is as early as yesterday, where people are thinking about it, but it has already started to be implemented in India, is the economical impact and the sustainable approach when it comes to building these AI models. So you have a lot of cooling which goes in containing these environments, containing these AI systems because they're very hot. So you have a lot of liquid cooling, whether it is nitrogen or just cold ice water spanning across. The solution is submerge the systems, keep them underwater. Now, this news is as early as yesterday, and that is something I have been part of a discussion forum 4 years ago, which India has already started to implement, and in certain places within the country, it is already being implemented. If you submerge the entire system and the water is being constantly run in and out without any cooling environment, the amount of water consumption goes down. The amount of cooling energy requirement is also going down. And thirdly, the entire piping is less because you're not cooling the system and you're just running it through the system. So the spaces are going down. And this is how some of the supercomputers that we have for AI training systems are now being developed and integrated into this. So it's also a very sustainable approach. Now people are thinking about it globally in certain spaces. India has been discussing that pre-COVID, before anybody had this thought. So that is also one of the unique ways that we are also contributing to the AI space and creating this beautiful AI climate synergy where we are also one of the key partners when it comes to AI climate solutions and sustainable approaches.
Great. I think from all of you and knowing what India is doing, we're not that far behind. We're in fact leading the talk in some ways. And even in the Summit of the Future, there were many projections of what India is doing within AI. I think that's all I wanted to ask from you. Now we can move on to the Q&A section where people, I think they might have many questions. You can either raise your hand or put them in the chat box, whatever you want to ask a panelist. Yeah. Hi, Agrivan. Yes.
And thanks for the session, Maya, Jamalil, and Ruvak. It was inspiring to understand on what has been the role of AI and to understand more about the intricacies or some of the misconception that has been spoken earlier. I have 3 questions that I would like to get your insights upon. The very first one is all about the inequality gap which is being created due to the technological inclusion. Like whenever a technology or something is brought, it always disrupts the ecosystem, and there are few sections of the society which gets impacted to the most. So I am trying to understand if there has been any index that has been created in the world system to understand on how this AI inequality gap has been measured or tracked, and also the KPIs to ensure that how it can be effectively addressed, any parameters. And especially since Maya has been associated with the OECD working group, I also want to understand if the conversation has already been discussed in the global forum before to ensure that how global south or the economy of the world can make sure or come up with an index to address this inequality issue. That's my first question. And my second question would be on backcasting. Like people would always talk about using AI to forecast or to improve the forecasting. As much as I love forecasting, backcasting is also another area where I love to work upon. And that's why I was trying to understand on how AI can be leveraged with respect to backcasting or when it comes to strategic making. And my third question would be on the intersection of Stanford's equation. Impact equals population into affluence into the technological impact, and Herman Daly's sustainability definition, wherein technology should improve the efficiency rather than increasing the consumption. And I see AI as a double-edged sword. Like, it helps in increasing the efficiency. At the same time, in some areas, it increases the resource consumption as well. So I'm trying to understand, has that been any framework to help me understand how I can effectively use, or what can be done with this to ensure that I make use of AI in the most effective manner, apart from my own conscious decision? So these are my questions. Thank you.
So, Maya, would you want to go first because there was a specific question for you?
Sure. Thank you so much for the questions. Again, great insights, and I think that you're touching some of the, I think the loopholes that we are witnessing when it comes to the frameworks. First of all, when it comes to any inequality indexes, there are a lot of, I would say, upcoming initiatives to create KPIs for fairness. I mean, you will see some fairness matrices to tell you that it's as rigorous, as diverse. The question is no. I think that what we'll see more, you will see more critiques about the existing frameworks, which I think it's a good process to be in. So we're seeing a lot of different frameworks, different actors trying to show how we should treat AI. To my understanding, I've seen more, again, global indexes of AI across sectors. I am aware of some initiatives coming about, again, trying to address a bit more the inequality and the digital divide, but I think that we still need to see more rigorous work around that. But I would say that it's interesting to see the different KPIs from the private actors to the government actors. So interestingly, I think that a lot of the AI frameworks actually started by the big tech companies. They were trying to show how AI should be developed ethically. And a lot of the concerns that you also mentioned are highlighted there. And then, of course, there was a bit of a pushback with, again, from other actors trying to show that they're also able to create some guidelines. To sum it up, in a way, I feel that we still need to see more rigorous and more globally spread metrics and KPIs on how we're measuring the digital divide and the inequality, which I think is alone a very interesting and complex topic, because of course it varies across countries. I'm also wondering who will be the most suitable actor to do such an initiative, which will be as, again, widespread in scope. But we're starting to see some pilots. To your question about any OECD discussions, there are a lot of discussions, especially on the digital divide. I think that one of the biggest reasons that the mandate of the future of work has been also on, again, creating some very strong projects on the informal sector, and generally the future of work are connected to this. There are some reports also, I would say. But I would say that they're still a bit less scientific, because I think that there are still a lot of things that we need to measure when it comes to the understanding of the digital divide as a concept, to understanding a bit more what is inequality. And this is something that will vary across regions, cultures and sectors. And yet I do want to, again, echo and say this is a very important discussion that is done in parts of the organization. The OECD clearly puts a lot of emphasis on that. And the best way for us to address it is through the pilot that we are doing in the working groups in one way. Of course, there are a lot of reports, but I think that the biggest goal for us is also to do these pilots, either literacy programs or generally interacting with universities, because we're also trying to understand how to measure the digital divide in a way, and understanding how AI shapes inequality. There are a lot of studies that can be also interesting to read. When it comes to decision-making and building strategies with AI. So this is, I think, one of the more interesting aspects that we're starting to see more about the use of AI. It's crossing a bit discussions of climate in a way. There are a lot of very interesting things that are actually trying to show how AI can be, again, a possible simulation to some workers. The MIT Media Lab is actually doing amazing work. I was in touch with them for some initiatives in India for the Kumbhathon. I don't know if you've heard of the Kumbhathon, but it's the first AI hackathon that is supposed to provide some public solutions to some of the upcoming threats of the Kumbh Mela in 2027. So we were doing it in Nashik. Again, a lot of discussions on climate AI. Specifically, they're now doing a pilot of doing board meetings when some of the workers are actually AI driven. And the point was to show, first of all, to give some simulations for CEOs on how we're taking different decisions. So take this as an example on about some of the things that are currently being done. Of course, this can be replicated also for, again, some of the climate threats and climate solutions that we're doing. But yes, clearly AI seems to be a very interesting actor when it comes to having more informed decisions and building better our strategy, because we have an understanding of what might possibly happen based on some data sets. So, and again, this is I hope I answered some of the questions, but of course I let also like the other co-op panelists share about their perspective.
Maybe I can go. So, thanks, Agrawal, for questions. Yeah, very important questions. So I think just to add to the inequality part of it, I think it's important to assess. I mean, I can talk about it from policy level a little bit probably, but yeah, important to assess, what are the sort of sectors and who are the people who might be at risk because of this. I mean, it's one part of it to sort of equip everyone to be able to benefit from AI, but I think it's also we need to begin with an assessment of who are the people who might be sort of at immediate risk. And again, one of the ways in which this is very similar to the energy transition is that there's a little bit of cautious optimism that if it leads to some risks in one sector, it will lead to more jobs in another sector. So I think that identification based on the structure at an economic level is important, because that's the starting point for your programs to for very targeted initiatives on making sure that everyone has everyone's on a level playing field. So for example, I think one of the things that keeps coming up is upskilling and reskilling of the workforce, right? Like people need to pick up new skills, or people need, some skills might become redundant and people might need to retrain on another skills. Now, what are the skill sets that might become redundant, or what are the jobs that might become redundant? Who are the people who are going to be affected by it? And then how do we get them retrained onto, the skills that would be required in the future? So I think thinking about that in quite important. And then within that, I think there might also be like a gender aspect of it, right? Like, for example, the International Labour Organization, I was looking at a study that they published. So they say that 2.3% of all jobs are at risk, but within that, it's specifically the clerical jobs, which might be at higher risk, secretaries, finance-related jobs, insurance-related jobs. Now, in some parts of the world, these are professions where women are more involved, maybe 30 to 50% of the women who are employed are sort of employed in these spaces. Now, if these jobs become redundant, then it means that structurally women are getting more impacted in some of these parts of the world. So, so yeah, having, I think, that comprehensive assessment, coming up with a framework at a larger level is important, but I think that has to be done more contextually as well, and that becomes the starting point for how do we give people the tools to sort of still find high quality work and not affect their livelihood. Yeah, I think backcasting is also quite important. Again, in the climate space, increasingly the trajectory for development is extremely policy driven, which it wasn't necessarily in the past, right? We've got a 2070 target for net zero. We've got a 2030 target for, how much clean energy do we want in the system. Now, the way these things work is that, the policy will set a target and then you expect the entire economy to sort of work backwards to start meeting that. So I think there's a lot of interesting work that can be done there. Something that we do at CW is this kind of modeling that, if for a national economy level net zero target for India, what does that mean for different sectors in terms of when emissions should peak? Should the power sector be decarbonized first? Should the industrial sector be decarbonized first? Should the transport sector be decarbonized first? What are the risks? So I think there's definitely room to improve our capabilities in that sense. But I think, again, it comes back to data. A lot of this is very granular administrative data, which is not always there. So you tend to sort of fall back on assumptions. So I think it's good to have that conversation so that we also start, collecting the right kind of information that's required for us to do that kind of strategizing. I didn't fully understand your question on, impact. So if you can maybe repeat that.
Are you talking about the I equals PAT and the sustainability definition? Okay, so both the concept talks about on increasing the efficiency rather than resource consumption, which is the major definition that they have laid out for technology. So my point of view is that AI works in both the ways. At one area, it helps in improving efficiency to a greater extent, like it replaces so many things that has been done in a manual way, thereby saving so much of resources, which has both tangible and intangible benefit. At the same time, making use of so many energy and other materialistic aspect, it also leads to resource consumption. So being in a sustainable consumption production space, we always try to understand on for each and every aspect what would be the KPI to define and measure so that we take a defined impact. So when I'm suggesting AI as a proper or one of the suggestion to improve a client's aspect, I want to understand on what could be the methodology to understand on where it might help in increasing the efficiency and where it might lead to over resource consumption so that I can take a better decision accordingly, whether to go ahead with AI or to combine with AI or to leave AI as such or not. So what would be the approach? Like, have you come across before? Is what I was trying to understand.
Yeah, not really. At a personal level, I would imagine that it's probably like a positive trade-off for AI because, it's not really, I don't know how much of a incremental resource consumption because of AI can be attributable to like one query that you put on ChatGPT or some other application. I think, yeah, some of this still needs to be answered on what are the net impacts of AI. So I haven't come across any study that sort of does that at this point. I think there's a lot of a little bit of recognition that there are potential risks, which is the first step forward. And I think hopefully from here on there'll be more quantitative assessments on this. But yeah, I haven't seen anything to that effect as of now. But yeah, Dhwanil, if you want to also pitch into your questions.
Yeah, so I won't answer the first question because I think Maya and Dhruv have answered it very nicely. So I'm going to skip on that. Coming to the second question, when you're talking about back tracing or when you're talking about backcasting, then yes, there is quite a bit of work that has already been done. One of the easiest ways, let's say if you want to just study the climate data, there is one environment called NCEP, which is part of the NASA ecosystem, where they have a reanalysis 2 product, which has at least 27 different components from temperature, humidity, and uh, air profile and air quality, which is available going back till the 1900s. So we have already used AI systems and the current data that we have. So we are already going 124 years. That's one way. Second, paleoclimatic studies is already one component where AI is extensively being used. That how was it, let's say, 200 million years ago? But that is a very delicate state because the current globe shape, that is what we have today, is not what was there 100 million years ago. So there are certain attempts being made, but it is not complete. It is not accurate enough that we can rely on it to some extent. But yes, there are approaches being done. So what people are now doing is they are narrow downing the study that they want to approach. So instead of taking, let's say, on a global level or a country level, you just look at it at a state level. So their simulations are there. There are certain studies which have come out in the last year and a half, which are looking at these approaches. But the data is still not available completely. But there is a portal you can check out called Hugging Face, which has certain pre-trained AI models which are also looking at paleoclimatic approaches. So you'll have to fine tune it or tweak it or just test it out with some data that you have. But yes, these models have started now appearing in open forums. And to answer your third question, where you're talking about the synergy approach and how do you counter over resources and efficiency, yes, There are studies, there are approaches. In fact, there is an entire debate that is happening with 3 think tanks in India, which they are trying to figure out on a sustainable approach. It's a very huge debate because where do you consider a delicate balance between this trade-off? So the crudest approach right now, until there is a direct quantifiable solution, is that does your approach really require it? Because it is computationally intensive, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources to build something. And yes, a lot of times people who don't understand, it is treated as a black box. And if you go very complicated, it is even for the experts to feel confused themselves that how do you find the solution or what is happening really inside that AI model. So in that case, it is better to go on a physical approach or simplistic statistics to build whatever solution that you're looking for if you're doing computations. Otherwise, you can try it out, but normally it is better to have, when it comes to AI, it is a really good assistant for us. It comes with your expertise within that domain. So based on that, you can actually make a judgment whether you really need a very complicated model or a very simple model. And because of the computational strains that are coming in within the environment, because they are very large, smaller and more extensive and easier models that are coming to use. Like continuous weather forecasting has something called an LSTM model, long short-term memory in technical aspects. There is a more effective paper which is available on preprint, which came out on 21st of November, called XLSTM, which is 1/5 the size of the model and which is easily usable on a computer or a small desktop. So yes, there are approaches, but this question of climate impact has only come out very recently, especially after the whole ChatGPT boom. So maybe in a year or year two, we'll have a more easier solution to the question that you're asking, and it will be easier for us to quantify where the trade-off is going to be effective enough, but maybe not.
Got it, Dwanil. And thank you everyone for sharing your wonderful insights. It was quite interesting to know about the intricacies. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hagrivan, for that very insightful question. Actually, I think it also got a bit technical. Can I ask the speakers if our cohort or any of the audience members have any other questions for you? If you're completely fine with sharing your email ID with them or any other place that you're fine, having them reach out to you, can you please add that in the chat? Also, if you shared any resources, because I think both Dhruva and Dhanil, you guys mentioned resources of where people can find more data, or where they can also take a look at, these pre-trained, predefined AI models. Can you also add those in the chat so that people have that handy? There was also another question from Nena. She's asking if you have any recommendations for sources where they can check out, how AI is playing a role in climate action, where they can get a better understanding in a sense of, all the applications of AI for climate. If you have any suggestions, perhaps, CEW has like a page on that, or perhaps ISRO, has some information on that. If you could just share that with, you can obviously speak up about it, but if there's a link available, can you please add it in the chat? Also, if there are any other questions yes, Harshita, please, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hello.
And just please mention who the question is for as well.
Okay, I have questions for Maya and Dwanil. Both in the way that they're talking about, Dwanil is maybe talking about decentralized infrastructure for AI, and then Maya is working with government. So I want to understand what is the structure, kind of infrastructure that is required by like a government organization and then somebody who's doing it on a private basis.
What do you mean by infrastructure?
Infrastructure meaning like the data centers that are being created or maybe not created, whatever is the infrastructure that is required, like in terms of computers, in terms of the new technology that has to be given to the farmers, maybe like some tablets or some phones of some kind.
A great question, and I'm asking because also the concept of I would say of technical infrastructure changes according to again to the ones involved. Specifically, I would say that one of the goals for us was to make sure that every farmer can access our program. That's why we piloted the program as an app, as a mobile app. So it's something that they can access via WhatsApp, Telegram. Why specifically these platforms? These are the ones that usually are mostly common. I mean, there are a lot of other current government initiatives for AI chatbots for farmers, some launched by Métis, some by other actors. So usually we're doing these programs over this platform so that everyone can access, so that again, the infrastructure won't be an obstacle. Specifically, since again, this program is a course, so it's not that we have a data center, like it mainly we are here creating a course available for the farmers. We're actually doing the pilot, it will be for 20,000 farmers, and we're doing this for them free of cost with our partners, because for us, the goal is just to be able to give them the course to get the data afterwards. So for us, the data infrastructure part starts a bit after the course, because now once we have the feedback from the farmers, we'll be analyzing it and understanding adoption. So this is an example for one government initiative. Usually, to my understanding, of course, there is much more sensitivity when it comes to having, again, data centers connected to the government. There is a lot of work again on decentralization, understanding exactly who can access the data. There is a lot of work behind, but also I think you will see a change between, again, the private sector that again will engage with perhaps more technically driven data and initiatives, and the government that, it can be sometimes a bit broader in scope. For instance, educational programs that are on AI, that is, I would say, something that we're seeing quite a bit. And then we're always trying to do work that will be able to be accessed by as many actors possible. But of course, perhaps I can share, of course, from his experience. So this is specifically an example here from what we do with the OECD. So specifically WhatsApp and Telegram, just to increase the scope of the program.
And I want to understand, like, what is the role of AI here, and like, are we using, what data are we using? Like, it requires a lot of data we're hearing, but where is its data stored? Because data is actually stored somewhere, like in hardware. So does
About the
the
program. So specifically, again, this is literacy programs. So we are teaching about AI, meaning
but your data is from which organization? Is it like open source AI?
It's not open source. It's not open source. This is something that we have created. We have our partners. So our partners are, again,
they're private organizations.
It's not private organization. Again, it's government. It's not government. Again, we're working with universities. We have different partners for this. So usually multilaterals will have different organizations, usually fluent. So again, I would say let's have a difference a bit between clearly everything connected to AI and data. So we're trying to understand the storage, but it's also about what activity we're doing. So specifically here with the government, we're doing a fluency program. So it's a course. It's a course that we are developing, again, and designing. The data for it, of course, will be with the partners because it's government. So in most cases, it will be, again, either, again, public entities, NGOs. Specifically here, it's a government. So it's a mix of international NGOs and universities in this sense, because we are delivering it for a specific audience. So the data stays again with certain service and data sets, but again, this can change. So it's also according to the project, and that I would say that this question can, I guess, get more. I mean, if it's sensitive data, then the question will be different. So specifically, he was speaking about an AI fluency program. So the question of sensitivity is a bit different. I hope that I got your question and I answered it.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Yeah, Harshita. You also had the same question for Dhwanil?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Dhwanil, over to you. Sorry, before you start though, we'll take one more question from the audience, but in the interest of time, we'll just limit it to one short question. If anyone else has it, you can raise your hand and ask once Dhwanil is done with his response, or you can put it in the chat as well. Yeah, Dhwanil, please go on.
I'm unable to hear him.
Yeah, no, Dhwanil, your voice is not audible. Can you please check again? No. Yeah, now you're audible.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think my headphones are just saying it's a low battery problem. Anyways, so when you're talking about infrastructure related to data sets where these data reservoirs are being held off, yes, there are 3-4 organizations, if I'm just talking about India, which are hosting these data structures, which are hosting these data available for the public. Some, again, are very publicly available. Second, a lot of them are hidden because they are still being validated as a quality problem. We have an extensive amount of data which is available, which we can use, but the quality is very questionable in nature. So if you talk about the governmental side of it, then there are 3 organizations which look at it. One is the Department of Space and Tech. They have huge reservoirs. They have huge spaces where this data is initially being stored in hardware. Now it is converted into a digital platform. Some of that data is available openly. So if you, let's say, talk about ISRO or the DST sources, then you have portals like Bhuniti, you have NRSC, which are providing these data sources available for anyone to use. If you want, I can also post those links within the chat. When it comes to private players, now for private players, let's say if you talk about the space program like SatSure, if you talk about ISRI itself, then they have hybrid models which are available where a lot of data is available for free and a lot of it is still hidden in certain firewalls because they are either being integrated with some products or they are being improved upon. So SatSure has 2 portals where you can freely download data. If you're talking about ISRI, then there is an entire platform called Living Atlas, which is available and a lot of people can actually have a look at it. So there are places, and because with this whole push for open spaces, a push for open sources, there are a lot of portals which are now coming to this open consortium. So OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium, is actually pushing for open data science. So gradually, the discussions are that how do you put more and more data available to the public? So even Bhunithi's entire concept was that you get data as good as 1 meter resolution available for the public. So right now, some are available at 4.5 meter resolution, and then they are gradually going to be improved. If you're looking at weather data, then there is a portal called MOSDAQ, which is part of the application division, which puts paleoclimatic current data and data sets going as back as 6-7 years, which is now available at maybe 30-minute interval. So they are pushing for it. They are sharing more and more. And eventually over the span, because this is the year of open data, 24-25 cycle, at least by OGC. So it will get easier to acquire. And Google Earth Engine is one of the easiest ways you can actually acquire data for a lot of spaces. You just sign up and there are tutorials. You can just copy paste them and just select the time period you want and you can easily work with it.
Does that help, Harshita?
Yes, I'll have to look it up. Although,
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll also compile all of these resources that the speakers have shared and share it with the cohort on our Slack. But if there's any other question from the audience, we can take one more short question. Okay, If you have any questions at a later stage, you have the emails and LinkedIn profiles of the three speakers. You can always reach out to them. Can I request everyone to please turn your cameras on so that we can take a quick screenshot and, you know, commemorate this event? Just if you can turn your cameras on very briefly, doesn't have to be. Okay, slowly the cameras are getting on. Vaibhavi, Aryan, Shyam, Samapika, Jim. Okay, no more cameras getting on. All right. Just smile for the camera and I'm going to take a quick screenshot. So you can continue smiling. I'll have to take a couple of screenshots. All right, ready, smile. Let's say AI. Okay. Thank you so much. Tulika, you can wrap us up for the day now.
Yes, it has been a very, very good session. In fact, I also learned so many things. I had a very skewed understanding of AI. And like everyone else here, just a minute. Huh? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like everyone else here, I had a very limited understanding of what AI is, and I was more skeptical of its, use. But I think most of that got cleared out with the help of the three of you. I got to know so many things I didn't, and I will definitely go back and check on it. The, the programs that you shared that India just started yesterday and the program with NASA, I think that's quite inspiring also. So I will do check on that on a personal note. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking out time. I know nobody likes to wake up on a Saturday morning, and after work, it gets really hard. So, thank you for that. Thank you, all the audience, for coming and asking good questions. Yes, I'll see you again in some way. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maya, Dhwanil, Dhruva. It was lovely hearing from you guys, and a lot of information, new information has been acquired, I guess. A lot more to also learn about AI. I think it also helps us expand our understanding of this very niche area, but something that's very booming. So yeah, I think for the cohort, a good exercise would also be to just go back and search how AI is being applied for other climate solutions beyond what we've already discussed here. Because I'm sure that it's not just limited to this. And as our speakers have also mentioned, the use of AI is only growing with every passing day. So yeah, this is something we should definitely look out for in the future. But thank you everyone for joining, especially the speakers for taking out the time to interact with our cohort and with the audience as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Viveka. Thanks, everyone.
And to the co-panelists.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful
It was-
initiative and great questions. So again, definitely feel free to reach out for any additional insights you might have. This is a growing field, and this discussions, I think, what keeps the industry going also in a way. So feel free to reach out.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you, everyone. Dhruv, you can go first. It's okay.
No. I was just saying thank you again. Yeah, and completely to echo
Yeah.
Maya, it's great to see that everyone's engaging with the topic. So, and thanks to Lika for all of the questions. And yeah, please feel free to reach out at any point. More than happy to sort of engage further. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I think Maya and Dhruv have already summarized what we all collectively feel. And it is nice to see that if you all pick this up as the new and the next generation warriors when it comes to AI, and it is always a welcome point to discuss in the future as well. So feel free to reach out whenever and if you need to discuss something. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone.
Bye. I think Viveka, you can end the meeting. You're the host, so